Good afternoon. On behalf of the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention's National Girls Institute, welcome to today's webinar entitled A Trauma-Informed Effective Reinforcement System for Girls. My name is Linda Rosen, and I'm a Program Manager with the Innovation Research Division at OJJDP. We're delighted that you've joined us for today's webinar. It's the second webinar we've offered specifically relating to trauma-informed best practices for girls. Today's presentation will feature Kimberly Silvaggi as a presenter and Dr. Angie Wolf as moderator, to discuss a research-based female model offering short-term detention and residential programs as effective alternatives to compliance-focused behavior management systems. It is our goal that some of the information shared with you today will resonate and assist you to continue the important work of gender-appropriate trauma-informed services for young women. We'll begin our webinar in just a few minutes, but at this time I'd like to introduce to you Callie Long from OJJDP's National Training and Technical Assistance Center, who will provide some technology guidance. Callie?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. As your host, I would like to take a couple of minutes to discuss a few features of Adobe Connect, which will help you maximize your opportunity to participate in today's webinar. To view the bios and photos of the presentation panel, please access the Word documents which are now available in the Handouts pod of the webinar dashboard. Numerous handouts will be referenced today that are also located there for your resource library. To send a chat message to me, your host, a panelist, or another attendee, please click the menu icon in the upper right-hand corner of the chat pod. Choose Start Chat With, then select Host, Presenters, or Specific Attendees. Type your message in the chat box, hit Enter, or click the message bubble icon to send. For those of you participating in today's webinar as a group, please take a minute and help us count. Go to the chat window and type in the name of the person registered and the total number of additional people in the room with you today. This will help us with our final account. Again, if you're reviewing with a larger group, please type in the name of the person registered and the number of additional people joining you today. There will be numerous opportunities for Q&A throughout the presentation. Questions will be answered live as time permits during the question and answer sessions. At the conclusion of today's webinar, you will be provided with a link to take a 5-minute online survey about today's presentation. We appreciate your feedback regarding this webinar. This information is used to assist in future planning and training. You will be able to access the evaluation link on the last slide of the PowerPoint. For those of you participating as a group, when you return to your office, please enter the link on the last slide into your web browser to share your feedback. And finally, this event will be archived on OJJDP's online university at www.intac.org in approximately 3 weeks. Again, thank you for joining us today. I will now turn it over to Angie Wolf, your moderator. So I think we're having a slight problem hearing Angie. So we're going to go ahead and move forward to Kim. Kim, if you're ready, we'll go ahead and start your presentation.
Well, welcome everyone to the webinar today. Can everyone hear me?
You sound great, Kim.
From my team, am I coming through okay? Okay. Thank you. So I wanted to start off by looking at your responses to some poll questions. And I'm hoping everyone had a chance to review the poll questions and answer based on what's true for you. The first one was, what type of program or facility do you represent? And the second one is, what area of the country are you from? So if you haven't had a chance to take the poll questions, we'll give you guys about 20-30 seconds to record your responses so we can see who's out there. Okay, I think we're just about to close the poll questions. Right now it looks like 23% of you are from a residential treatment center, 13% are from short-term detention. We have a small number, 1.8, from training school, about 5% from group homes, 19% for community-based non-residential programs, and other. We've got 37% of you in the other category, so you're leaving me wondering. And so the next question, what area of the country are you from? Let's see what's coming in. Just a few more seconds. Okay, so it looks like the highest number of you are calling from the Midwest. We've got about 29% of you from the Midwest. And the East Coast and the West Coast are equally matched at just under 19%. And I'm seeing the South at 14%, and the remainder from the Northwest, the Northeast, and 5% of you in other. So I'm guessing that we might have some visitors from the islands, which would be exciting, or maybe some Canadian friends from the North. Okay, so let's get going. I'm not sure if Angie's going to be able to join us, but we will make room for her if she's able to connect via the audio. Okay, so I did want to just say a quick thank you to the team at the National Girls Institute for having me today, and really welcome everyone to the webinar. I wanted to start by talking about what the tier system for girls is and how it's different than traditional behavior management systems. Then we're going to talk briefly about the foundation of the system and the approaches integrated into the model. So the tier system for girls is gender responsive and it's research based. It's comprehensive, which means that it's not just a system to reinforce positive behaviors. It supports a complete shift in your program or facility culture. It's designed for residential programs, so we're talking detention, group homes, or even longer term residential programs. And we created it to both establish a trauma-informed, gender-responsive program culture, but also to replace the traditional compliance-focused behavior management system. Okay, so what do I mean by compliance-focused? I'm really talking about traditional points and level systems. I'm talking about behavior management approaches that outline a set of rules where staff decide what points girls get based on a set of rules and where they can be taken away based on when staff decides that she's misbehaving, right? So when she's acting out, they can be withdrawn. These are systems that are really imposed on girls. They're not systems that work with girls to help them learn new skills. And really that's what we're after, right? I'm also talking about the use of isolation as a consequence for what's called bad behavior. I've seen detention centers where the only consequence for breaking the rules is being isolated in your room or your cell. And we know that often the consequences that girls get escalate into physical restraints. So here's the thing, compliance-focused systems just temporarily suppress certain behaviors. They don't do anything to teach or guide girls towards behavior change, and that's really what we're after. So the practices that we're trying to replace often result in repeated unsafe behaviors or even more significant unsafe behaviors. And that's our clue that they're not working. We see girls in these settings really shutting down. They become disengaged, we see them silenced, or they respond aggressively towards us, both verbally and physically. And the program culture here has to be part of our conversation, especially when you consider the trauma that girls have experienced and think about a safe culture versus an unsafe triggering environment. It's no wonder we see high numbers of physical restraints or isolation or even staff injury. We know also that there is increased pressure on facilities to ensure safety. So numbers of restraints and isolations are reviewed regularly, but we're not doing well in this regard, are we? Because really the environments aren't changing to reflect what girls need to feel safe and contribute towards a safe environment. So in TIER, the organizing principle is trauma-informed practice. Establishing and maintaining physically and emotionally safe environments is the foundation of the system. It's not just a behavior motivation system, it also creates a culture. So as I said, it's not built on compliance. So what do we do instead? We're teaching staff new skills so we can be more effective in motivating positive behavior within the girls. Along with our understanding of the deficits of a points and level system, I just want to make a note here about this typical rules language. What we're learning is that girls are responding better when they're working within a system that reinforces behaviors that translate out into the real world, right? So these are things that align with positive behaviors like kindness, respect for themselves and others, hard work, honesty, relationship building, positive engagement. These kinds of things translate out and can help them in their life outside of where they are right now. We have to constantly remember that girls in our care experience trauma at higher rates than their peers in the general population. And so one of the reasons a compliance-focused environment doesn't work for girls is because of their experiences of victimization. So survivors of abuse, remember, were forced into compliance by the perpetrators. So compliance through the lens of where they're sitting is often connected to the abuse that they suffered. So the goal of the TIER system is to create physically and emotionally safe environments. You're going to hear me say that a lot today, where girls really can access opportunities to grow and learn. And they're going to do this because they're going to learn new skills from staff. So this means that staff have to learn new skills in how to help girls, how to teach them to be safe and contribute towards a safe environment while they're living with others. So first, I just want to review some of the foundational principles of the model. It's built on best practices, trauma-informed care principles, gender responsive, which includes approaches that are relational, strengths-based, and culturally competent, and lastly, motivational interviewing techniques. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, best practices, really quickly, they're research principles that we translate into practice that have demonstrated effectiveness or promising results for the population served. And as we start off this morning, or this afternoon for some of you, I'm just going to give a thumbnail sketch to make sure that we're all on the same page about what some of these practices and principles really mean. So we're going to start here with trauma-informed care, which if you know anything about the population of girls in custody, you know that the rates of trauma are alarmingly high. If you ignore the importance of trauma-informed care, which is the essence of our model, you ignore the opportunity to really help the girls that are working with you while they're in your care. So let's start with a definition. I want to clear one thing up right now, and that is that trauma-informed services are not specifically designed to treat symptoms of trauma. They're informed about and sensitive to trauma-related issues. So trauma-informed, So we have to make sure that every aspect of your service delivery system is modified to include a basic understanding of how trauma affects the life of the person seeking your services. And in this case, they're probably not seeking your services, but they've wound up at your door. It really requires that everything that we do is trauma informed. We have to create a culture where girls feel safe, accepted, and understood. Some of the key principles of trauma-informed care include being physically and emotionally safe, which I'm going to talk about more in a moment. Trustworthiness, which means that you say what you mean and you mean what you say. Choice, which we're defining here as giving girls as many opportunities for decision-making as we can. Collaboration, which means we're working with girls. We're not doing the work and then telling her how it's going to go. And empowerment, where we're recognizing her strengths and creating opportunities for her to grow and to succeed. In order to do this, we really need to make sure that we're taking trauma into account and we avoid triggering trauma reactions or further traumatizing a person. It means that we have to adjust our behavior so that we can support each person's individual coping capacity. So it means that staff have to think about their language, their tone of voice, their body language, how they can support girls when they're struggling, and that the environment needs to be reviewed from the lens of a person who's experienced trauma and could be triggered by the environment. Now, I want to back up for just a second to make sure we're all on the same page when we define safety. These are really the things we do or don't do to create a safe environment. So to create a sense of physical safety, we need to create a space that looks and feels like girls' space, where no physical harm are going to come to them, to the staff, or to their belongings. To create a sense of emotional safety, we need to create a program culture that respects and values girls, understands the challenges they face, and offers support to them when they're struggling. And to create a sense of psychological safety, we need to prioritize consistency, both the schedule, the environment, but particularly in how staff respond to the issues and problems, right? Staff consistency is one of the most important features of a safe program culture. I was working to assess a program here in Connecticut for gender responsive and trauma informed principals. And I asked the girls about typical consequences that they get for a specific behavior. And every single one of them said, it depends on who's working. Then I asked the staff, and to my surprise or chagrin, they said, well, it really depends on who's working. So we have to remember that while this is often the case, it's just not contributing or aligned with good practice. So with so many experiences of trauma in the lives of the girls who are system involved, we have to remember how important it is that we are trauma informed. By the time they enter into our system, they come to see us, they end up at our door, she's already begun to act out in delinquent ways, sometimes aggressive to themselves or others. But imagine if we interpreted this as a strength, a successful survival strategy. What if we first view this as a strength instead of, say, an antisocial kind of behavior? It doesn't mean that staff approve of these behaviors, but that they talk about aggression in a non-judgmental or supportive way. They talk about root causes of anger and explore options that are available as alternative ways to deal with their anger or frustration. So the methods outlined in the TIER system focus on personal and community safety, which is an empowering paradigm for girls, We want them to learn how to stay safe, and that's really the goal of the system. So next, let's consider what we mean when we say gender responsive. Gender responsive practice is really the intentional integration of approaches and services that specifically address female development, girls' orientation to the world, trauma exposure, and in juvenile justice settings, these are really the unique pathways that girls travel. So this requires approaches that are trauma-informed, relational, strengths-based, and culturally competent. Okay? So in order to apply this in our work, we need to use all of these approaches. And I included trauma-informed, even though I've already talked about that a little bit, because you just can't be gender responsive unless you are also trauma-informed. So let's start with a relational approach to make sure we're all on the same page. If we look at the research on girls' development, we see immediately that relationships are critical. So girls develop their sense of self through the relationships that she has in her life, the good and frankly the not so good. The connection or interconnection that she has with others is foundational to her healthy development, and yet we know girls in our care have not experienced fulfilling healthy relationships, right? It's no wonder they're struggling when they have been so misinformed about what goes into a healthy relationship. So a relational approach, a relational practice fosters a collaborative process between staff and girls. Okay, we're talking about trying to establish communication as an interaction and dialogue rather than a constant debate. So in order to use a relational approach, we're thinking about developing and encouraging healthy relationships with and among girls. We're talking about teaching girls about the role of relationships in our lives, and we're acknowledging and recognizing the importance of her relationships. Now, again, before I move on, we are literally scratching the surface of these concepts just to give you an idea of how they relate to the TIER system, but there's so much more information that you really need in order to apply these approaches that we're just sort of, going along quickly today. So the next one, strengths-based. Strengths-based approaches really infuse the recognition of girls' strengths into our daily interactions with them, as well as into some formal program practices. We have to recognize girls' strengths throughout those daily interactions. We have to teach girls to use skills that they may have learned under adverse circumstances in a more healthy, effective way. So let's take manipulation, for example, right? If you're thinking about it in a strengths-based way, it really means that she thinks critically about how to get something achieved using all the resources available to her. And we could work with her to help her reframe some of this. We often punish her for being confrontational, for example, but if she was being confrontational towards someone who was trying to harm her, wouldn't we see that as a strength? We've really got to do better in teaching girls how to use these skills that they might have learned under adverse circumstances in healthier ways. And last, we have to find opportunities for them to succeed and build new skills. Even small achievements help girls gain confidence, and they can begin then to think differently about what might be possible in their future. So strengths-based becomes much more than just recognizing what talents girls have. It becomes part of the way that you do your work with girls. So the next one I want to define is cultural competence. We get questioned a lot about why this approach is included in our list of required approaches. And really the answer is simple. Just as you can't separate a girl from her experience of being female, you can't separate her from experiences of her culture. And frankly, gender is often very prescribed within cultural groups. Really simply stated, cultural competence means that the program or facility fosters a non-judgmental, accepting, and diversity-embracing environment. We know that the juvenile justice system is overrepresented by girls of color, that African American and Latino girls are populating residential programs at higher disproportional rates than white girls. And these disparities increase as the sanction becomes more severe. So if you look at arrest rates by ethnicity, they may be less disproportionate, but disproportionality increases when you look deeper into the system, like detention or in training schools. So culturally competent practice really recognizes the differences among groups, but forces us to look at our own cultural uniqueness. Being a white female, I'm very aware that the girls of color that I work with make assumptions about where I come from and what I might be like. And frankly, they've told me what some of those assumptions are, and 9 times out of 10, they're a little off base. So we talk about our cultural background. We really open the lines of communication and invite a healthy curiosity. So we need to also get to know the cultural norms of the populations we serve, but at the same time, we'll never know truly what culture meant to her in her family of origin or where she grew up. So we have to adopt a non-judgmental attitude and have a healthy curiosity of difference. Okay, so that's the blend. That's the linchpin. Adopting a non-judgmental attitude and having a healthy curiosity of difference. The last approach I want to define before we move into the system is motivational interviewing, which I'm sure many of you out there have heard of or may be using now. It's widely known as a best practice. It's well documented. It's a strongly research-based framework, and it really provides a set of skills that can help staff learn to promote intrinsic motivation. We really like MI because it reinforces some of the gender-responsive and trauma-informed principles. So for example, it requires collaboration. So you have to work with each girl on her specific and individual challenges. Evocation, which means staff really work to discover her story, her reasons for wanting to change or not wanting to change. And autonomy, which means that staff will respect her decisions, whatever they might be, regarding a behavior change. So we know that motivation comes from intrinsic and extrinsic sources. And the key to successfully using MI is really to find ways to help girls achieve their best selves. And so they do this through discovering their intrinsic values. And their intrinsic values can be the same factors that help to motivate girls to learn safe, respectful behaviors while they're in our systems. We help girls learn that movement towards pro-social skills help them both now and in the future. And in addition to the MI skills, there's a couple of things that staff have to believe in order for this to be useful. And I love these because they're so consistent with what we're trying to do with the culture change. And the first thing is that they have to believe that girls can change. They have to believe that girls want to change. And yet they have to understand and accept that girls will be ambivalent, show resistance, or be uncertain about making those changes. And during training, we teach staff how to use the ORs. Again, those of you out there who know MI know that this is sort of the fundamental basics. So open-ended questions, generally these are things you can't answer with a yes or no answer or even a one-word response. So you're going to say, you're not going to say, how are you doing today, which could be good or bad or okay. You're going to say, tell me about your day. Or if you're talking about her responsibilities, how did you do with this responsibility? Inviting more information. Affirmations, these are really validations or statements of encouragement. So things like, you're doing a great job sharing, and thank you for being so honest with me. A reflection, which is when we verbally reflect back what you think you're hearing and what you think she's feeling. So it's a blend of the context of what she's saying, also with the sentiment that you think that she's saying it with. And a summarization, this is where we wrap up each section to help or to make a transition really to a new topic by verbally summarizing what's been said. So these strategies really help girls learn that you're listening to them, right? They always want you to be listening to them. So these are good skills to have to help that happen. It also helps to set the stage for trust. And since we all want girls to do better than they did when they arrived at our door, we really have to create these opportunities for connection and trust. So in training, we work with staff to develop some of these skills that they're using in the tier system, because you'll see that a lot of the language that we use is consistent with these principles. So we have another poll question, and the question is, have you incorporated any gender responsive practices? And if yes, which ones? So let's open that up now, and we'll leave it open for 20 or 30 seconds or so. Well, I'm excited to see that my screen is starting to come up blue, which means a lot of you are responding, and it looks like a lot of you are using multiple practices. So we're just about to close. Okay, so I'm seeing about 75% of you are using a strengths-based approach. This is incredible because really this is one of the features that really helps to give girls motivation, right? And to feel better about themselves than when they walked in the door. Trauma informs at 65%. I have to say this is pretty impressive because when I'm out consulting, it's not generally what I'm seeing out there. So I'm thrilled that those of you who are on the call or on the webinar are committed to this and are starting to use it. 50% are saying they use relational practices, and 50% are saying they use culturally competent practices. And 11% of you said not applicable. So I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I appreciate that you wrote in. Okay, so I want to stop here before we really get into the model specifics and see if there's any questions before we move on.
Having earlier, I think we do have a couple of questions for you.
Give us 1 second, Kim.
Sure, or would you like me to continue and wait till the next set of next stop for questions? Believe there's some technical difficulties. We're getting there though, so hang tight. Okay, so I'm getting a prompt that we're going to move on. So those of you who've asked questions, don't think they're lost. They are there, and the next time we get to a stop for questions, we can make sure that we address those. Okay, so we're going to get into the system now. I want to take you through the components of the model. And again, remember, this is sort of what my colleague Eileen Russo calls the appetizer. This is not a full, 5, 6, 7 course meal. It's not enough to teach you what you need to know to implement the model. It's just an overview to give you a flavor of what the tier system can offer to you. So this is the framework, myself, my relationships, my community, that reinforces the principles that we just discussed. And as you'll see, we'll use this framework throughout the system to help create the program culture. In the myself domain, let me back up one, here's where we teach girls about the value of their unique self by helping them to explore and identify who they are, where they want to go, and ideas about how to get there. This is really important because girls come to us with little or no understanding of who they really are. And building a girl's self-esteem is particularly challenging when they're coming into the system with such long histories of abuse. And often the abuse and neglect they suffered was at the very hands of the family members or caregivers who were supposed to love and protect them. This is really confusing for girls, and yet it's not something they're often talking about, and it contributes to their feelings of worthlessness and often shame. Sometimes girls come from an environment where substance abuse was present in the lives of their caregivers, and this means that they weren't a priority in their homes. The drug of choice was the priority. That's what received the focus and attention from the person who was supposed to take care of them. So the girls learn to take care of themselves, but without the knowledge or skills to do this effectively. So we need to teach girls that although this may have been difficult and not what they needed, it demonstrates real strength and survival skills. Just because they didn't receive the care a child needs doesn't mean they're not important, and it doesn't mean that they're not of great value. In my relationships, we focus on helping girls learn about what a healthy relationship looks like and feels like. We know that girls live in the world of relationships. They see themselves through those important relationships in their lives, and they develop their sense of self in relation to others. But many of the girls that come into our programs never experienced a fully nurturing, caring, or empathetic, respectful relationship. So they ended up with this distorted understanding of what a relationship should look and feel like. It also results in girls' misunderstanding of their role in relationship. They were led to believe that relationships are about getting what you want from others. We see behaviors from girls that validate this, particularly like disrespectful, manipulative type of behaviors. But really, a lot of times, this is copycat behaviors who are from girls who are really mirroring what they have learned at home or in other environments. The tier system frames this paradigm as a lack of knowledge and skills. Okay, so since relationships are important and often motivating to girls, we teach staff how to help girls access the fulfillment that relationships can and should bring. So the staff should expect that girls are going to act disrespectful and use these opportunities to support their development. In the My Community domain, we focus on helping girls learn how to be part of and contribute to a safe and empowering program culture. So we're pretty aware that the girls in the program are likely to come from environments that are not safe. They're chaotic, they're at times dangerous. So this is true sometimes in the homes that they were in, or their schools, or their communities, which means that they don't know what it feels like to live in or contribute to a safe environment. Constant threats of hostility or violence ends up with girls who are guarded, disconnected, or even aggressive when they perceive danger. So through the My Community domain, girls learn how to be part of this safe, empowering program culture. And we're obviously needing to teach staff skills that they can use to establish a safe environment. And there's specific strategies that reinforce this. Girls are going to be positively reinforced when they contribute to program safety, and then they'll begin to realize how they can positively affect the environment. Most behavior management systems are failing because they don't provide opportunities for girls to contribute to the community, despite that these are the very contributions that help girls feel important, like they're a part of something. So we've talked a little bit about the new communication skills for staff. We don't have a ton of time to go into that anymore in depth. But I did want to show you sort of the list of things that we are going to go through during our time together today. We're going to talk next about daily responsibilities and daily responsibility reviews, which is sort of the cornerstone of the model. We're going to talk about the memberships, something called the Daily Dozen, tier staff interventions, the community theme of the day or week, a programming process called Social Issue Sunday, the gatherings, personal coaches, and the notebook. So let's get started. So daily responsibilities. This is how we reframe rules into language that's actually meaningful to girls, right? These are the responsibilities that girls have every day, and they're organized into the framework that we just discussed, myself, my relationships, my community. So instead of random rules that often don't make sense to girls, we frame this in a way that girls understand, the way many girls see the world, themselves, their relationships, and their communities. So just to make sure that we're all on the same page, daily responsibilities are the tasks and behaviors that are expected of girls while they're in our programs, okay? And they're organized into those 3 domains, myself, my relationships, and my community. They learn to be responsible for working on their responsibilities in the program every day, and how well she does in meeting her responsibilities is connected directly to the kinds of opportunities or privileges and community responsibilities she might have. So we'll discuss how this is organized in just a few minutes. But I want to give you some examples of what we're talking about here so you can get a sense of how they're organized. So demonstrated respect for myself, learning to value my strengths, and taking care of my personal responsibilities. These are the kinds of things that we organize under the myself domain. And some quick examples are completed my hygiene routine, attended all groups and activities, asked for help when I was struggling. And hopefully you can see how these are stated positively. It's, no being late. It's not no being late or failed to attend groups or, blew up on staff. It's positively stated. And these are just some examples. But frankly, as we go through these, you'll see they have to be customized for every setting. So they're not all the same. Different program environments have different expectations, and that's completely normal. So my relationships, this is working towards building healthy relationships, improving nonverbal communication, and learning healthy verbal communication skills. Some examples for you are demonstrated respect for my staff and peers, refrained from rolling my eyes or using disrespectful facial expressions. This is never a problem for girls, is it? Prepared for a good visit with my family. And the my community domain encapsulates things that help girls understand how to demonstrate respect for the physical space of the program and that they can make contributions towards this safe, healthy program culture. So they demonstrated respect for the program environment, they actively participated in community gatherings, and they contributed something positive to the program. Okay, so how do we know how she's doing with these daily responsibilities? The daily responsibility reviews are conducted once or twice a day, depending on your program setting, and it's a very brief 2-way conversation that staff have with the girl. The purpose is to help her think about her behavior and ask for needed support, and it also ensures that she has a voice in this process, which is really critical. The process, I know I've got several bullets here, but it's really 3 main things. First, the staff and the girl discuss the girl's impressions of things she did well during that time period. Then the staff identify any additional areas that she did well in, and they offer praise or affirmations. Then they discuss areas where she struggled, and the staff asks her what she needs in terms of support to do better in those areas. And third, they discuss what she's earned in each domain, myself, my relationships, my community. And those are indicated by the letters T, L, and C, which I'll explain what they mean in just a moment. Okay, so here's an example of what the form looks like that we use when we go through with the girls. So if this was the My Responsibilities area, and she was really struggling, she may earn a T, which it means that she wasn't doing so well in this area, or she didn't put much effort into that part of her responsibility today. If she earned an L, it means that she did pretty well and she put some effort in, but she's not quite yet at the role model level. And if she earns a C, it means that she did an excellent job in this area, or that she worked really hard on that area of her responsibilities for the day. Then there's space for the girls' feedback, the staff feedback, and asking for support that she needs. So what do the T, L, and C mean? The tier system memberships, and actually we had a cute little graphic here that's not here, but the T represents that girls need to think more about completing their responsibilities and that they're struggling in that area. Learning is I'm learning how to do well with my responsibilities, and contributing means that she's making contributions to the safety of the program. Okay, so the more times that she is earning a T, the more we're realizing that she needs more support from us. The more times that she's earning a C, which is contribute, we know that she's role modeling and she's doing a really good job. So girls in the contributing are really excelling and meeting their responsibilities in all areas. Okay, so girls with a contribute membership might earn a later bedtime, more access to activities, more free time, and they'll have more community responsibilities. They might help co-facilitate a house meeting or be a peer mentor to a new girl. In one program we work with, the girls on contribute do meal planning and preparation. So at each level, the privileges and opportunities are tied to the membership and what she's ready for. And unlike most behavior motivation systems or behavior management systems, we don't increase the number of chores or arbitrary tasks for girls to do if they're struggling. If they're struggling, it means that they need more support, they need more help, they don't need necessarily more work to do. So we try to give them the space in order to do that. So girls are going to fluctuate between these memberships throughout their stay. That's pretty normal. And we have to remember that none of these memberships are bad, nor should they be presented to the girls in any kind of shameful way. Whatever membership she's earned should be genuinely accepted and celebrated. It's just where she's at, okay? And I might have mentioned this earlier, but every program that we work with is going to have a different set of privileges or opportunities for the girls to enjoy, and that's going to be based specifically on what's appropriate based on the level of supervision that the girls need or the kinds of activities or privileges that are available in that community. Okay, so I just want to again remind you of the fundamental principle of TIER. It's to promote safety, defined for girls as personal safety, interpersonal safety, community safety. Girls want to feel safe, and when they understand that they have a stake in the game and it makes sense to them, they get it. They're motivated to protect it. So staff helps to promote these elements at all times, and they do this by modeling safe behavior and encouraging the girls to do their best. Okay. So the next component is the daily dozen, because for some girls, motivators need to be daily, and waiting even 3 or 4 days for their membership to find out what they've earned is just too long for them. So they really need something every day to work towards. So for each 24-hour period, so like starting at bedtime and continuing through to about dinner time, the girls are going to have the opportunity to earn privileges every day. So this part is an incentive program that really aids in promoting healthy, safe behavior every day, regardless of what membership that she has earned, okay? So there's 6 areas that if she does well, she can earn privileges that day. And these are things like activities or special events that will take place at night. And we're not talking big ticket items here, not talking a lot of expense. We're talking about things like having dinner with the program manager, having access to the yoga class, working on a craft project, or doing a Wii tournament with staff. So you can get creative about what kinds of incentives that you use, but here's the thing. The incentives have to be something that the girls want to do or gain, so they have to be involved in planning them. So we recommend that girls who are have earned a learning membership or a contributing membership could have this, planning these activities as part of their responsibilities. So I want to show you a sample of what this looks. Okay, did you complete your evening routine? Did you complete your morning routine? Did you attend school groups and activities? Did you contribute and participate in school and those groups and activity? Did you refrain from unsafe behavior? And did you complete your chores or homework? And you can define 2 or 3 specific things here. And if she earns yes in every area, she earns the daily dozen incentive, okay? And that's usually something we recommend making sure that the girls get access to somewhere around dinner time, so that after dinner you could have the group or the activity that would be the incentive. So just to review really quickly, these are fundamental components of the system. As residents or girls or clients or whatever you call them demonstrate safe, healthy behaviors, they get access to more privileges and opportunities and community responsibilities. No membership is a bad membership. Once something is earned, it can't be unearned. You can't take something away that she's already earned. And the only time privileges are ever limited or temporarily restricted are for severe, unsafe behaviors. That's the only time. They're not removed, they're just limited for a specific amount of time. Okay? So I think we have another poll question here. Are you currently using a traditional level system where points can be earned and taken away? So we'll leave this open for a few minutes or a few, maybe 20, 30 seconds. Okay, looks like everybody has responded, and it's about 50-50. We've got almost 48% who say yes, we do have a points and level system, and we have 52% that are saying no. Okay, so 50-50. So we're starting to move away from these systems, which is really great news.
Technology permitting.
Okay, I think we're going to have time for questions now.
Hi, great. So we're getting questions from a couple of different angles. The first angle is around how adaptable this is to different kinds of girls. So is this system appropriate for young, very young girls and for older girls and women?
Okay, so it was really designed for adolescent girls. So we're talking about like a 12 to 18-year-old range. But because so much of this can be customized, I think with some adaptations, you could use it for a younger group or for an older group. But I wouldn't necessarily just take the system and use it as is without making those appropriate adaptations. And are you guys hearing me better?
Is this system a system that could be used in non-residential placements as well?
I'm sorry, say that again? There are components of the system that you can use in non-residential placements, but as you'll see as we go through, there's a lot of components that are really residential specific.
Gender-responsive programming may or may not be successful with gender non-conforming use.
Isn't that always a challenge? I was actually at a program the other day, and they have a young girl, as many programs often do, and she's really struggling with her gender identity, and she presents to the world as a male, and so the program director, who's very well-intended, said to me, I'm not sure if I should be putting her in the girls group, and I'm wondering if I should be driving her over to the boys program to put her in there. So I knew right away that that was not the appropriate response. She's although she's struggling, I think the system that, or the culture that this creates is so welcoming and so open and so requires staff to have a different and new attitude that I think girls who even though are struggling with really significant issues can benefit from a much safer environment. Because the truth is, really, if we're talking about a trauma-informed environment, it should be appropriate and and working more effectively for girls who are struggling with all kinds of issues. And so, I think that I would love to have more time to talk specifically about the challenges of working with girls who struggle like that.
Okay, great. Thanks,
but
Kim.
Maybe we could do that
Are
after
there,
the
do you ever
webinar
work
via
with
email.
jurisdictions that have challenges associated with finding the reinforcements for the daily dozen? And if so, what do you suggest that they try?
Well, some people love the answer and some people hate the answer. The answer really comes from the resources that are your staff. So staff come with a set of unique talents and skills, even though sometimes they don't feel like they do after a day's work. So they're your resources, and getting creative of what they can be doing with the girls, and sort of aligning what their talents are with the girls' interests can be great ways to develop those incentives if you don't have a big budget. Thank you. I've adjusted my speaker, and I'm just wondering if you can hear me any better. Okay. All right, so we'll get back to this. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about how staff intervene and address challenging behaviors. So this is the TIER behavior interventions, and there's 5 of them. It's not always apparent when you're trying to maintain a relational and strengths-based approach of how you actually intervene when things aren't going so well. Because despite our best efforts, girls in residential settings are going to present challenging behaviors that are unsafe. So these are the responses that the staff are taught to use or to intervene with when things come up. So staff's response is going to increase in intensity as the behaviors become more challenging. And this replaces the points or isolation or other consequences that we're talking about not really being effective. So the first one's verbal warning, which we're going to talk in depth about all of these in just a minute. Coaching, the client assistance plan, temporary privilege restriction, and temporary community restriction. Let's go through these and talk about how each of them works. So the first one is a verbal warning, and this is really to address minor behavioral issues with really just a simple verbal reminder. So an example is using a girl who's using offensive language like swearing. So here, staff are taught to address this issue with just a really simple reminder. Let's say a girl was excluding another girl. Staff might say, I saw that you excluded her, and I just want to remind you that excluding others is hurtful, and we don't allow that here. And if someone was doing that to you, I'd ask them to stop on your behalf. And then you move on. You don't harp on it. You move on. You're teaching them that, okay, we've addressed it. Now we're going to go on to the next thing. The next level is coaching, and this is for moderate difficulties, and staff are taught to use a coaching technique to verbally process the situation. So staff are going to have a private discussion, not in front of other girls, where they engage in a one-on-one conversation about the behavior and try to get behind what the behavior, the purpose of the behavior, and discuss alternatives. Now, although it looks like a lot of things you have to get through, the truth is this goes very quickly. This is a 5-minute or less conversation, very brief. You're going to name the behavior and explain why it's considered unsafe or unhealthy. You're going to ask her why she chose to act in that manner. You're going to reflect back her comments or validate any feelings. And this next part is really key. You're going to note anything she did well in that exchange or any progress that you've seen from a prior similar situation. Okay? So let's say she's usually very physically assaultive, but this time she, banged a chair against the wall. You could say something like, last time you were angry, you were physically aggressive with staff. And while hitting the wall is still aggressive, you were able to contain your anger enough to avoid hurting another person. And that's a very good thing. Then you discuss some alternatives for future similar situations. You redirect her, and once again, you move on. Okay? So this is not long stuff. These are quick interventions. The next one is the client assistance plan. This is the next level intervention. It's really for moderate to severe difficulties. and where staff are going to facilitate this plan with her. It's a standardized document that they're going to use to guide the conversation. It helps to more formally process it with her and to help her learn how to build skills to avoid the same behavior in the future. So once she's completed the plan, let me just take you through what it looks like. These are the kinds of things that we do during this discussion with the client assistance plan. We have her verbalize her impressions of what led to the behavior or why it occurred. We discuss her values and beliefs about it, explore alternatives. What could she have done differently? What might she want to do differently in the future? What help does she need from staff? And what is the plan to move forward? Okay. And once she's completed the plan and makes any restitution due to the behavior, you move on. We encourage staff to use their MI skills here because the intervention tiers are going to help her figure out what need she was trying to get met, what was the problem behind the behavior. And we have to remember that her values and belief system is affecting her thinking, so we actually have to talk about that. All right, so we might ask questions like, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is the least appropriate behavior you can imagine and 10 is the most appropriate behavior you can imagine, how would you rate your behavior in this situation? And then when she gives a number, you say, well, why not a higher number? Or why not a lower number? And you can discuss why she thinks and feels this way, all right? Because the purpose, again, is to teach new skills, to have them stop and think, okay? So I want to go next to the privilege restriction. This one is not generally used in secure, locked settings because most girls don't have enough privilege access that there's nothing to restrict, nothing substantial where you can actually identify a single privilege that she values. It works best for those of you out there in those non-secure settings or group homes. We're actually implementing now at 2 group homes, and they are using this privilege restriction as one of their interventions. So the privilege restriction is used when a girl is misusing a specific privilege or they're demonstrating behaviors that interfere with the program responsibilities related to a specific privilege. Staff will use the client assistance plan and restrict that privilege until all the strategies on the plan are met. Okay, so let's say that she was looking at inappropriate images on a cell phone that she had access to, which is often the case in the group homes that we're working with. You could temporarily restrict access to the cell phone for a short period while she has time to work through the client assistance plan. So those 2 things go together. And the girls can regain the privilege after those restorative actions are completed, and they're going to be specific to the situation. So while staff are taught these interventions, the way the kids move through the plan is going to be specific to the situation that was unique to her. Okay, the next one is temporary community restriction. This is the most restrictive intervention that we have, and the purpose is to reinforce that any severe unsafe behaviors are going to result in restricted access to their peers, activities, and privileges. Okay. Once again, the client assistance plan is used to process and help her plan for what is going to change next time. And during this time, staff's really working with her to understand why the behavior was unsafe or disruptive, and really work with her to develop and execute any necessary restorative actions. And there's going to be quite a few if it was a really unsafe behavior. We're talking about things like a physical assault or a verbal threat or attempted runaway or not telling staff where you're going and sort of disappearing for even a few minutes at a time at some programs is very problematic. It also can be used if there's a behavior that was addressed using a client assistance plan that keeps returning. Okay. The length of time that a girl has a temporary community restriction will be dependent on the severity of her behavior and her readiness to demonstrate change. So how quickly she moves through the elements of the client assistance plan is a big part of how fast she regains her privileges. But the community needs to feel safe too, and this requires thoughtful consideration among supervisors and the program manager. The goal, the purpose of a temporary community restriction is to clearly indicate to girls that unsafe behaviors are going to result in some restricted access to the things that they do enjoy, access to their peers, any fun activities or any privileges that she's gotten because of her membership. But staff are really working with her during this time to try to teach her some new behaviors or explore what other options she has to the behaviors that she's demonstrating. One note here is that girls are not to be isolated in their rooms during this time. They're spending a lot of time with staff. They're not isolated in their room. And they're also not spending a lot of time with the other residents or clients in your program because she's demonstrated some pretty significant unsafe behavior. Okay, so to wrap up this section, I just want to take you through a really quick scenario, just sort of highlight some of the interventions and so you can think about how it works. So let's say our girl is Veronica, and Veronica has had a really bad day. She was very late getting up in the morning. She didn't want to go to school. She almost refused to not go to school. And after school, she threatened a staff member when they asked her to get ready for group. Okay, so she's not having a good one. So we would suggest that when she when she was having trouble getting up in the morning, that we use a verbal warning technique to try to get her up and going. And that staff used the coaching technique to work with her when she was starting to refuse to go to school. And that when she threatened a staff member after school, that the staff would use a client assistance plan. Okay, so basically the determination of what to apply is organized into those tiers. And we spend a lot of time with providers with specific programs to figure out which behavior belongs where. What is the first line of intervention we should use for a variety of behaviors? And like I said, in the 2 group homes that we have going right now, they have different behaviors in different categories. In one program, swearing is rampant and they're just sort of tired of it. So they've decided that coaching is going to be the first level intervention when the girls are swearing at each other. And at the other program, it's not such an issue and they feel like a verbal warning is appropriate. So again, this is part of the customization process. Okay, I think it's almost time for questions again. This is a very dense section, so I wanted to make sure we had some time for questions. Okay, I think I'm back. Do we have any questions? Just want to check in with my team. Should we keep going or is it good for me to stop? Okay, I guess we're not going to hear the questions. So I'm seeing someone asked about staffing ratios required to implement. It's hard to say really because it depends on a couple things. It depends on how secure your setting is.
Keep going, Kim.
And what the daily requirements of staff are. But we have, is someone there? Okay, so we have one of the programs that we're working with has 2 staff on, and there are 10 to 12 girls at the program at any given time, and it will not be a problem for them to implement because the girls don't need constant supervision. So if you were in a setting where girls needed more constant supervision, then having only 2 staff, it would be difficult to implement, but here it's not an issue. So I'd love if whoever asked that question to send me an email later so that I could find out more information about the kind of setting you have, the number of staff, and the number of girls, so we could talk through the kinds of components that could work for you.
Hi, Kim. What is the formal implementation process for implementing the tier system? Is it staff training? Is it on-site? How might a jurisdiction have access to this?
Well, generally speaking, what we've been doing is we're asked to come out by a site that wants to implement the model. And so we will come out and do a 2-day training with all of the staff possible. We actually just finished two 2-day trainings for a couple different sites who were working together. And after that, we really recommend that there is some implementation time where we go out to the programs and help them with getting through that initial stage of implementation. Now, fortunately, because of technology, we're able to do some of this via the web. So we don't necessarily have to be on site to do implementation and still work with staff during the implementation period to make sure things are going well. And I think that's really important. And there are some tools within the system that I'll talk about later, but there are some tools to make sure that you can check yourselves and look at fidelity to the different areas of the model and make sure that the staff are really catching on and they can use as learning tools as well.
To modify a particular behavior, is that the girl, is that staff, is that a joint decision between the two of them?
You're welcome. Yeah, I mean, when they're working through the client assistance plan, they come up with a series of maybe restorative actions. That's a good way to sort of term it, and things that she's ready to do. You're going to see how motivated she is to gain access to the privileges and responsibilities that she is sort of frozen right now for her by her willingness to take part in the actions that she's outlined on her plan, right? So as the staff see that she's motivated and ready and started to move on that, you can see how ready she is to sort of rejoin the community if she's on, let's say, temporary community restriction.
Limitations.
Well, one of the things about the client assistance plan is that it's not something you give to girls to fill out. It's a guided discussion with girls, and really we just give staff some prompts. But we encourage them to use their own language to get to the heart of the question and to have girls understand what it is that they're asking them. So you can really adapt them any way that you need to from a language standpoint, as long as you're making sure that you're getting to the intention behind the question.
That are using physical restraints, are there alternatives? How does that fit within the system and your philosophy?
Well, when I worked at the judicial branch for 12 years and did a lot of really good work with some amazing people there. And we built some behavior management systems based on the same kinds of principles that we're talking about today. And a couple of the programs actually have physical restraints. And what we noticed right away within a year of implementation is that the number of restraints were dropping. So while restraint is possible to make sure that safety can be maintained, when you implement a system that makes sense to girls, that girls buy into, makes them feel safer, they're not triggered all the time, you see those numbers coming down, which is what we want everywhere, whether restraint is acceptable in that population or that the program model or not. So that's one of the benefits, is whether or not you are instructed to restrain for certain behaviors, this is going to decrease those numbers because of the very nature of how the girls feel in the program.
Tribal areas?
Not right now, although I would love to work with folks around this issue. So not as of right now, but I can't see any reason why we couldn't. Thank you. Okay, so before we continue, I just want to make a quick note about staff consistency, which I mentioned earlier, but we know that this is universally one of the biggest issues in programs and facilities, right? So when there's inconsistency in staff responses, it causes an unstable environment for the staff and the girls. Sometimes the girls believe that some of the staff are just bad or that they favor particular girls. These are the kinds of issues, These are the kinds of issues that really cause an unsafe environment because it's unpredictable for the girls. So I want to go into another layer of how we build the program culture in the TIER system. We talked before about the framework of myself, my relationships, and my community. These are really interwoven in the system, as you're probably starting to see. But because it's more than a system and it's a change to your program culture, one of the things that we do is we have something called the community theme of the day or community theme of the week. Okay, and this really is a program-specific theme that your internal community, and I'm talking about the kids who live at your place, work on for the day or the week. And it's based on one of the 3 domains, and it's determined in collaboration with the girls and the staff. So the conversation between the staff and the girls is going to be about, what's going well in the community right now, and what things do we really need to work on as a community. Okay, so you might pick a theme. Maybe you have an issue in the community around nonverbal body language. Maybe like there's lots of teeth sucking and eye rolling and sort of nonverbals, and it's really maybe a little bit even out of control. So you're going to pick that theme for the community to work on, but you're going to talk with girls about getting there. So this kind of stuff really reinforces the program culture, helps the girls remain focused on growth, not where they are now, but where they want to go. And we encourage programs to discuss these themes in the morning, and then talk about progress in the evening. And we'll talk about sort of the framework to do that in just a few minutes. I want to just give you a quick example of what I mean by the community theme of the day or the theme of the week. Let's say they were really having trouble with language, like this program I talked to you about where swearing is just rampant and they just can't seem to get a handle on it. Maybe they would pick the theme using respectful language. We're going to work on using respectful language. That falls within the domain of my relationships. And I want to show you a visual of what I'm talking about. Oh, it's not there. Well, I was going to show you a visual of what I was going to talk about. But basically, they're going to pick that theme that's going to get the kids focused for the day or the week. And I've got a program now that is doing every 2 days, they change the theme, and the girls are engaged in this almost daily, talking about what's going well, talking about what they could do to improve, to try to get the community focused. Sunday is a very interesting day in programs in residential treatment. Most of the time girls say it's so boring and staff say we have nothing to do. So because of this, we figured we would offer a programming option called Social Issues Sunday. And it's really not something that has to be done on Sunday, but we picked Sunday because it's the under-programmed day of the week. Okay, so Social Issues Sunday, and if I could get to the arrow, there we go. It provides the community with an all-day focus on an important topic that girls can work on. And this is because, like I said, Sundays are often under-programmed in settings. So what we do is we have girls pick an age-appropriate, relevant topic that's important to them that they work on throughout the day, and the staff help to facilitate the process. They have the girls get into teams and discuss what they know about the issue, what they would like to learn about the issue, what they might do about the issue. The girls will determine their roles or responsibilities they want to take on, and then they perform tasks to get needed information about the issue. And I'm talking about things here like social justice issues or a community service project or issues of equal rights or maybe a local issue that's come up that girls are particularly concerned about. They can also focus on a common problem that they have related to being in the program or facility that they want to change. So it's sort of like setting the stage for some advocacy work. And after they've uncovered some information, the girls come back together, share what they've learned with each other, and come up with a plan to do or create some kind of project. And the kinds of projects I'm talking about are things like writing a letter to a company, maybe to get something changed, creating an ad to say, something's going wrong or we want to change this. Perhaps they could do a collage that reflects their ideas or opinions about the topic. Maybe they're going to make something for a disadvantaged group. So there's lots and lots of options about how to use this framework of Social Issues Sunday. And it's not a requirement of the model. It's sort of an add-on for folks saying, like, we need something to do with the girls on Sunday. We don't have a lot of staff necessarily, but things aren't going well because they're not engaged in anything. Okay. So another component of the system is integrating gatherings or meetings with the girls into the program schedule. We know that when we don't make sure that we have time for girls to talk, that they're going to take it. So we make sure that we have enough opportunity for the girls to get together and share and voice their opinions and feelings. So there's 2 meetings that happen regularly. One is the morning or evening community gathering, which I'm going to talk about in detail in just a minute. And the other one is the community improvement gathering, which is like a typical house meeting that happens once a week. The other meetings or gatherings are the greeting gathering, which is for when girls arrive at your facility or program, the community support gathering when things aren't going well or the kids feel unsafe about something, and the farewell gathering. And really what we do here is in the model, we provide very specific information about the purpose of the gathering and the agenda or intended outcomes of the gathering. So staff can literally pull out sheets about how it is that they're supposed to be run. And with all of the gatherings, unlike traditional meetings in facilities, staff do less talking than the girls do. They prompt for information, they make sure that they stay on schedule, but this is really about getting information and feedback from the girls. Okay, so let's talk briefly about the morning gathering just as an example. So if you were doing a morning community gathering, which should be done each morning to sort of get ready for the day, you would start by pointing out what's going well from the overnight in the morning. The staff would review the program schedule for the day and include any staff that kids can expect to see and ask the girls if they have any questions about the day. You ask one of the girls to name and describe the theme of the day because, again, girls are involved in making the decisions about what the themes are. And then you ask one of the or two of the following kinds of questions for the girls. What does the theme mean to you? How do you think you can make progress towards this today? What do you think you need from staff? Is there anything you need from us to have a better day? We also give the girls 5 minutes to jot down thoughts about how they're going to work toward their theme in their notebooks. And the notebooks is a process I'm going to talk to you about in just a minute. And we close with a community strength relating to the meeting participation. You know, it's kind of an affirmation to thank them for coming and to participating in the morning gathering. And these are gatherings that last 10 to 15 minutes. They're very, very quick just to make sure everybody's on the same page. You thank the girls for attending and you encourage them to have a good day. So again, this is more about the process and the agenda that's available so that everybody can be on the same page about what's supposed to be happening in the gatherings. You know, we were just doing training and we were talking about the community improvement gathering, which is the house meeting, this weekly meeting about getting things together. And when we talk to the girls about their house meeting, they say, well, it's just a time for us. It's just a time for the staff to yell at us and tell us everything we're doing wrong. And when you talk to the staff, they say all the girls do is complain in these meetings. When you actually have a structured meeting with an agenda where girls have roles and responsibilities, you start to minimize that kind of behavior and you really get focused on the task at hand. So just a reminder, there are 5 different gatherings. They're used for different reasons. The only regular gatherings are the morning and evening community gathering, the community improvement gathering, and then the last 3, the greeting, the community support, and the farewell, are as needed. You know, obviously, if you have a new girl coming in, that's the time for a greeting gathering. You have a girl leaving, that's the time for a farewell gathering. And the community support gathering happens when something happens to upset the girls. You know, we had a program director leave at one of our programs, and the girls were devastated. She sent a text message to say that she was leaving, and the staff came in and did a community support type gathering, and it was really helpful for the girls. Okay, so when girls enter the program, we're talking about the first couple days when she's there, they're likely to be very overwhelmed by the environment, the people they're meeting, and all of the unknowns, right? This is a time when staff have to demonstrate some extra care and warmth, and that's not always on our minds when we're taking in a new girl. So we have to also provide as much information as possible, and one of the ways that we try to ensure that girls feel safe as soon as possible is to have her connect with a person, a human being that's actually going to check in with her beyond this intake. And this is what we call the personal coach. And so the personal coach is a pre-qualified, meaning it's not whoever's available, but rather somebody who knows that they're going to be a personal coach, a person who's trained in these kinds of concepts, who is introduced the girl at intake and is responsible for helping her acclimate to the new environment. And some examples of a personal coach's responsibility would be to make sure that they introduce her to the residents and staff, they give her a tour and get her settled, they discuss the program schedule and what she can expect right away. They talk about some of the important information in the handbook, make sure that you go through things with her, and also review the notebook with her. And some things about the personal coach that aren't on here is that it's really important that they're constantly modeling healthy relationships with their peers, with their fellow staff, because the girls are looking to personal coaches to sort of look how to behave. And this is a person who's really going to advocate or be the go-to person for the girl throughout her stay. At longer term programs, the personal coach is usually assigned just during that orientation period, which could last 2 weeks to 6 weeks kind of thing. And then, the coach is just part of the staff configuration. But in detention centers, when girls are only there 2 weeks or a month, the personal coach is there throughout her stay. Another way we build support in is through the notebook, which we recommend giving to girls, that the personal coach actually gives to the girls on the very first day of her stay. And we created the notebook because we know that journaling activities can be really supportive and comforting, especially when a girl's making a big transition. So the personal coach is going to give her one and explain how to use it. And we designed the notebook to support the elements of the TIER system in a way that's really helpful to the girls. So the notebook has a space in the very first few pages for the girls to write down things that she learns about the program, the questions that she has, things that she thinks she'll be okay with, things about the program that she's really worried about. There's also a place for her to write down her strengths and her challenges, which could be helpful as she starts to learn about the system and how she's going to work within it. The second section of the notebook provides girls with worksheets that prompt them to think about the themes of the day. Okay, so myself, my relationships, my community, the challenges and things that went well each day, her thoughts about how to do better in the days ahead, and how they can use lessons that they're learning now later in their life, right? You don't want them to get stuck on sort of what's happening now. You want to be thinking about the future. So I have an example of part of a worksheet. So this is sort of the top half of one of the worksheets that we have. So here we have the domain is myself, and the theme of the day or the week is taking care of my physical health and hygiene. Some examples of that are having good hygiene, taking care of myself, eating nutritious food, exercising, seeking help for any physical problems. Okay, those are examples that she generates. And then in the morning, during the morning gathering, we're going to give her time to fill this out. Today I will work on this by doing the following things. If I start to struggle, I will do the following things. And then personal notes that she has. So that's one of the reasons why it's important to make sure we give her a few minutes each morning and each evening to write in their notebooks. And then the evening entry is very similar, but it says, how well did I do? What could I have done better? What support do I need to do better tomorrow? At the end of the notebook are worksheets on anger called Sometimes I Feel, which I'll show you in just a minute. This is one of the ways we help the girls deal with some of those difficult feelings, including angry feelings. And these workshops can really help them think about unpeeling those layers. So let's go take a look. This one is a sample page from the Sometimes I Feel section of the notebook. Here you can see the anger funnel, and this is actually adapted from Dr. Covington's work in her Beyond Violence curriculum for women. We know that often angry behaviors result from a series of difficult feelings. So we show girls what this might look like when we don't or can't process this really tough stuff. The worksheet that follows this is blank. So the words that you see here, pain, fear, uncertainty, grief, those are blank. And we have spaces for the girls to write in words that reflect how she's feeling, things that go into her personal anger funnel. And the concept behind this is that sometimes when we don't or can't process those tough feelings, it sort of goes into this big anger funnel. And at the bottom, all we see are these angry feelings and behaviors that result from that. So there's additional worksheets, but I thought I would show you just one more. This is called Dialing Down My Anger, where we acknowledge that there's situations when we feel as if the anger has taken over and we don't have control of our actions. But we note here that anger really isn't the problem, because girls have a right to feel pretty angry. It's how we act when we're angry that can be problematic. And these worksheets really help the girls identify those situations that can result in anger and unsafe behavior. So what we have them do is think about the intensity, think about a situation that makes them angry, and what is the intensity of the anger when that situation happens, and what are the behaviors she does because of how intense that anger feels. Okay? And the next part of this asks her to think about potential alternatives that maybe that she could deal with things slightly different. So folks who want a little bit more information about this section of the notebook can just send me a quick email and I'll make sure that I get that out for you. So as we start to wrap up our time together, I want to remind us all of the many reasons that girls might be struggling while they're in our care. Some of us assume that acting out behaviors are just purposeful defiance, like they're just trying to make things difficult for staff. But what we're learning is that there really is an underlying reason why girls are acting out, and girls in the program are probably experiencing internal struggles, which just place more stress on her. So they might have difficulty meeting daily responsibilities. This is a signal to us that she's struggling and needs more assistance from us. But we need to remember that these girls were survivors long before they got to us. And we get a lot of questions from people about how this model can work with real aggressive girls. So I do want to make a quick note of it here. We really understand that there are many challenges to developing a gender responsive environment. We get that it's hard for facilities and residentials to apply these gender and trauma informed practices specifically with aggressive girls. But we have to remember that these are girls who often spend many years being pulled in and out of facilities, from group homes to detention centers to treatment centers. So they're victims long before they're delinquents. And they often have a very good reason for their anger, but they've never been in a place safe enough to take advantage of any of the opportunities that were offered or to learn alternatives. Okay? So by building in this understanding into this system, even aggressive girls are engaged to learn new skills and contribute towards a safe environment. And here I just list some of the reasons that we forget about why girls might be struggling in the environment. You know, we forget that she could just be homesick, that she misses the place that she was. We forget that she can be fearful of what's around her. Will I be safe at night? What will happen when I take a shower? Will my door be open or closed? Who's going to come in and check on me in the middle of the night? She could be having feelings of shame about where she is. There are pretty prescribed set of detailed, it's kind of a detailed list of how girls are supposed to behave in our culture, and being in detention just doesn't fit within that mold. So we have to remember there could be some feelings of shame, probably are some feelings of shame about where she is. She could be the target of relational aggression within your culture, which means that other girls are bullying her in sort of an invisible sort of way. And she's not likely to tell staff when that happens because she's fearful that staff will just make it worse and the aggression will get worse. She could be unfamiliar with structure. A lot of the kids don't understand or don't know what it feels like to be in a structured environment and resist that initially, particularly if they were in charge of taking care of themselves. They're kind of looking at you like, you're going to tell me what to do. They're unsure of who to trust, and they're away from people who she might have strong emotional connections to. So even if they might not be healthy relationships, she relies on them for something, and that's missing right now while she's with you. So, clearly this is no easy task. Creating a trauma-informed, gender-responsive culture is not easy stuff. Rewriting rules to be meaningful expectation takes really thoughtful consideration. So that's why we do have some materials that can be helpful with this. The manual has full descriptions of the elements that we just reviewed, and we generally spend at least 2 days on site just training these concepts and then work with providers on an ongoing basis to make sure that they're implemented well. So each tool that I talked about today can be used independently, right? You could pull pieces out from what we talked about today and use them and improve what's going on in your program. But when you incorporate the entire toolkit, you really impact the direction of the culture of your program, and that's really where we want to go. So we're about done with
Hey
our
there,
time
Kim.
together. So I want to break for
This
questions
is
again.
Callie, and I just have a couple more questions to wrap up. Sorry, give us 1 second while we get rid of this echo. Okay, we had a couple questions about if this tier system could possibly work for males.
Well, a very wise woman once told me something that has proved to be true in my life anyway. And that is if you create programs for men or boys, nothing much changes for women and girls. But if you create something that's effective and beneficial for women and girls, somehow things improve for boys and men too. And so while this system is designed for girls, specifically girls in residential care, it can be adapted for boys.
Could you provide us with just a brief overview of the formal implementation process of this program? What kind of staff training is involved, that type of thing?
Usually we suggest a 2-day training, but with that request of 2-day training, we suggest to them that they should also have had some training on gender responsive practices and principles. So ideally, they'd have some gender responsive background and know what those concepts mean, and then we would come in for 2 days and do the training on the model, and then we'd follow that up with some kind of supported technical assistance for implementation. And that can be as intensive as, we have a program now we're doing 6 hours a week, and we're likely to be engaging with another site in the fall, and that'll look more like a teleconference support.
For the last question, what is the typical cost of the training that you provide?
Does that help? It ranges. It depends on a lot of things, number of people that are attending, number of different sites that are attending. So I just encourage folks to get in touch with me and let me know what's going on.
Thank you so much, Kim. That was the last question, and I'm going to turn it over to Linda to wrap us up.
I just want to thank you, first of all, Kim. It was so informative and so wonderful to hear. A lot of what you said, may be instinctive for folks, but it might not be consistent in the way they deal with situations. I know personally I've learned a lot today. And I just want to say on behalf of OJJDP, I'd like to thank all of our speakers and our hosts, the National Training and Technical Assistance Center, and you, the participants, for joining us. I hope the ideas expressed here will assist you in providing youth with the support services necessary to prevent them from experiencing additional trauma. Please take a moment to fill out the evaluation, which will pop up momentarily, in order to provide us with the feedback and any ideas you have for future webinars. And I also want to mention a couple of things. First of all, there's going to be another webinar in September, and it's going to focus on girls at the intersection of juvenile justice system and child trafficking. I also want to mention for the woman who, woman or man, whoever it was, the participant who asked about use of restraints, we did a webinar with the State Training and Technical Assistance Center on July 24th. It'll be archived on the NTTAC website. That's nttac.org. It's probably not there yet, but will be shortly. And it talked about the use, the negative impact of the use of restraints, especially for people with disabilities. I think it brought up a lot of good points that people might want to check into. And again, on behalf of OJJDP, thanks for your participation. We hope you'll join us again in the future. Oh, one more thing. If there are questions that you sent in that were not responded to live, please know that they will be sent to the presenter, they will be responded to, and they will be posted on our website as well, the NTTAC website. Thanks again.